Chapter 9 The Midnight Duel. Harry had never believed he would meet a boy he hated more than Dudley. But that was before he met Draco. Malfoy still first year Gryffindors only had potions with Slytherins, so they didn't have to put up with Malfoy much, or at least they didn't until they spotted a notice pin up in the Gryffindor common room that made them all grown flying lessons would be starting on Thursday, and Gryffindor and Slytherin would be learning together. Typical, said Harry darkly. Just what I always wanted, to make a fool of myself on a broomstick in front of Malfoy. He had been looking forward to learning to fly more than anything else. You don't know that you'll make a fool of yourself, said Ron reasonably. Anyway, I know Malfoy is always going on about how good he is at Quidditch, but I bet that's all talk. Malfoy certainly did talk about flying a lot. He complained loudly about first years never getting on the house Quidditch teams and told long, boastful stories that always seemed to end with him narrowly escaping muggles and helicopters. He wasn't the only one. Through the way Seamus Finnegan told it, he'd spent most of his childhood zooming around the countryside on his broomstick. Even Ron would tell anyone who'd listen about the time he'd almost hit a hang glider on Charlie's old broom. Everyone would from wizarding families talked about Quidditch constantly. Ron had already had a big argument with Dean Thomas, who'd shared their dormitory. About soccer, Ron couldn't see what was exciting about a game with only one ball where no one was allowed to fly. Harry caught Ron and prodding Dean's poster of West Ham soccer team, trying to make the players move. Neville had never been on a broomstick in his life because his grandmother had never let him near one privately. Harry felt she'd had a good reason, because Neville managed to have an extraordinary number of accidents, even with both feet on the ground. Hermione Granger was almost as nervous about flying as Neville was. This was something you couldn't learn by heart out of book. Now that she hadn't tried at breakfast on Thursday, she bored them all stupid with flying tips she'd gotten out of a library called Quidditch through the ages. Neville was hanging on to her every word, desperate for anything that might help him hang on to his broomsticks later, but everybody else was pleased when Hermione's lecture was interrupted by the arrival of the mail. Harry hadn't had a single letter since Harry's notes, something that Malfoy had been quick to notice, of course. Malfoy's eagle owl was always bringing him packages of sweets from home, which he opened gloatingly at the Slytherin table. A barn owl brought Neville a small package from his grandmother. He opened it excitedly and showed them a glass ball the size of a large marble, which seemed to be full of white smoke. "It's Rememberall," he explained. "Gran knows I forget things. If this tells you if there was something you've forgotten to do. Look, you hold it tight like this, and if it turns red..." Oh, his face fell because the Rememberall had suddenly glowed scarlet. "You've forgotten something." Neville was trying to remember what he had forgotten when Draco Malfoy, who was passing the Gryffindor table, snatched the Rememberall out of his hand. Harry and Ron jumped to their feet. They were half hoping a reason to fight Malfoy, but Professor McGonagall, who could spot trouble quicker than any teacher in the school, was there in a flash. "What's going on?" "Malfoy's got my Rememberall, Professor." Scowling, Malfoy quickly dropped the Rememberall back on the table. "Just looking," he said, and he sloped away with Crabbe and Goyle behind him. At 3:30 that afternoon, Harry and Ron and the Gryffindors hurried down the front steps onto the grounds for their first flying lesson. It was a clear, breezy day, and the grass rippled under their feet as they marched down the sloping lawns toward a smooth flat lawn on the opposite side of the grounds to the forbidden corridor, to the forbidden forest, I meant, whose trees were swaying darkly in the distance. The Slytherins were already there, and so were 20 broomsticks lying in neat lines on the ground. Harry had heard Fred and George Weasley complain about the school brooms and saying that some of them started to vibrate if you flew too high or always flew slightly to the left. Their teacher, Madam Hooch, arrived. She had short gray hair and yellow eyes like a hawk. Well, what are you waiting for? She barked. Everyone stand by a broomstick. Come on now, hurry up. Harry glanced down at his broom. It was an old and some of the twigs stuck out at old angles. Stick out your right hand over the broom, called Madam Hooch at the front, and stay up. Up! Shouted everyone. Harry's broom jumped into his hand and at once, but it was one of the few that did. Hermione Granger's had simply rolled over on the ground, and Neville's hadn't moved at all. Perhaps broom-like horses could tell when you were afraid, thought Harry. There was a quaver in Neville's voice that said only too clearly that he wanted to keep his feet on the ground. Madam Hooch then showed them how to mount their brooms without sliding off the end and walked up and down the rows, correcting their grips. Harry and Ron were delighted when she told Malfoy he'd been doing it wrong for years. Now, when I told you, my blooming missile, you kick off from the ground hard, said Madam Hooch. Keep your broom steady, rise a few feet, then come straight back down, beating my leading forward slightly. On my whistle, 3, 2, but Neville nervously and Jumpy, frightened of being left on the ground, pushed off hard before the whistle had touched Madam Hooch's lips. Come back, boy, she shouted, but Neville was rising straight up like a cork shot out of a bottle, 12 feet, 20 feet. Harry saw his scared white face, looked down and at the ground failing away, saw him gasp, slip sideways off the broom, and wham! A thud and nasty crack, and Neville lay face down on the grass in a heap. His broomstick was still rising higher and higher. It started to drift lazily toward the forbidden forest out of sight. Madam Hooch was bending over Neville, her face as white as his. Broken wrist. Harry heard her mutter, "Come on, boy, it's all right. Up you get." She turned to the rest of the class. Now, none of you is to move while I take this boy to the hospital wing. Understand? You leave these brooms where they are, or you'll be out of Hogwarts before you can say Quidditch. Come on, dear. Neville, his face tears straight, clutching his wrist, hobbled off with Madam Hooch, who had her arm around him. No sooner were they out of earshot than Malfoy burst into laughter. Did you see his face? The grabbed lump the other Slytherin joined in. Shut up, Malfoy, snapped Pavarti Paddle. Ooh, sticky for Lumbottom, said Passanese Parkinson, a hard-faced Slytherin girl. Never thought you liked fat little cry babies, Pavarti. Look, said Malfoy, darting forward and snatching something out of the grasp. It's that stupid thing Lumbottom's grand sent him. The Remember-All glittered in the sun as he held it up. Give it that here, Malfoy, said Harry quietly. Everyone stopped talking to watch. Malfoy smiled nastily. I think I'll leave it somewhere for Lumbottom to find. How about up a tree? Give it here, Harry yelled, but Malfoy had leapt onto his broomstick and taken it off. He hadn't been lying. He could fly well. Hovering level with the topmost branches of an oak, he called, "Come and get it, Potter!" Harry grabbed his broomstick. "No!" shouted Hermione. Madam Hooch told us not to move. You'll get us all into trouble. Harry ignored her. Blood was pounding in his ears. He mounted the brooms and kicked hard against the ground. And up he soared. Air rushed through his hair, and his robes whipped out behind him. And in a rush of fierce joy, he realized he found something he could do without being taught. This was easy. This was wonderful. He pulled his broomstick up a little to take it even higher, and he heard screams and gasps of girls back on the ground, and admiring whoop from Ron. He turned his broomstick sharply to face Malfoy in midair. Malfoy looked stunned. Give it here, Harry called, or I'll knock off your broom. Oh, yeah? Is that so? Said Malfoy, trying to sneer, but looking worried. Harry knew what to do. He leaned forward and grasped the broom tightly in both hands and shot it toward Malfoy like a javelin. Malfoy only just got out of the way in time. Harry made a sharp about face and held the broom steady. A few people below were clapping. No Crab and Goyle up here to save your neck, Malfoy, Harry called. The same thought he seemed to have struck Malfoy. Have it your way then. Catch it if you can then, he shouted, and he threw the glass ball into the air and streaked back toward the ground. Harry saw, as though in slow motion, the ball rise up in the air and then start to fall. He leaned forward and pointed in his broom handle. Next second, he was gathering speed in a steep dive, racing the ball. Wind whistled in his ears. Mingled with the screams of people watching, he stretched out of his hand a foot from the ground. He caught it just in time to pull his broom straight, and he toppled gently onto the grass with the Remember-All clutched safely in his fist. Harry Potter! His heart sank faster than he just dived. Professor McGonagall was running toward them. He got into his feet. Never in all my time at Hogwarts, Professor McGonagall was almost speechless with shock, and her flashed furiously. How dare you? You might have broken your neck. It wasn't his fault, Professor. Be quiet, Miss Paddle, but Malfoy. That's enough, Mr. Weasley. Potter, follow me now. Harry caught sight of Malfoy, Crabbe and Goyle's triumphant faces as he fell, walking numbly in Professor McGonagall's wake as he strode toward the castle. He wasn't going to be expelled. He just knew it. He wanted to say something to defend himself, but there seemed to be something wrong with his voice. Professor McGonagall was sweeping along without even looking at him. He had to jog to keep it up. Now he'd done it. He hadn't lasted 2 weeks. He'd be packing his bags in 10 minutes. What would the Dursleys say when he turned up on the doorstep? Up the front steps, up the marble staircase inside, and still Professor McGonagall didn't say a word to him. She wrenched open doors and marched along corridors with Harry trotting miserably behind her. Maybe she was talking to Dumbledore. He thought of Hagrid, expelled but allowed to stay on as a gamekeeper. Perhaps he could be Hagrid's assistant. His stomach twisted as he imagined it, watching Ron and the others becoming wizards while he stumped around the grounds carrying Hagrid's bag. Professor McGonagall stopped outside of a classroom. She opened the door and poked her head inside. Excuse me, Professor Flitwick. Can I borrow wood for a moment, please? Wood, thought Harry, bewildered. Was wood a cane she was going to use him on? But wood turned out to be a person, a blurry fifth-year boy who came out of Flitwick's class looking confused. Follow me, you two, said Professor McGonagall, and they marched on up the corridor, Wood looking curiously at Harry. In here, Professor McGonagall, pointing them into a classroom that was empty except for Peeves, who was busy writing rude words on the backboard. Out, Peeves, she barked. Peeves threw the chalk into a bin, which clanged loudly, and he swooped out, cursing. Professor McGonagall slammed the door behind him and turned to face the two boys. Potter, this is Oliver Wood. Wood, I have found you a seeker. Wood's expression changed from a puzzlement to delight. Are you serious, Professor? Absolutely, said Professor McGonagall crisply. The boy's a natural. I never seen anything like it. Was that your first time on a broomstick, Potter? Harry nodded silently. He didn't have a clue what was going on, but he didn't seem to be expelled, and some of the feelings started coming back to his legs. He caught that thing in his hand after a 50-foot dive. Professor McGonagall told Wood. Didn't even scratch himself. Charlie Weasley couldn't have done it. Wood was now looking as though all his dreams had come true at once. Even seen a game of Quidditch, Potter, he asked excitedly. Wood's captain of the Gryffindor team, Professor McGonagall explained. He just the build of a seeker too, said Wood, now walking around Harry and staring at him. Light, speedy, we'll have to get him a decent professor, a Nimbus 2000 or a clean sweep 7, I'd say. I shall speak to Professor Dumbledore, and if he can't bend the first year, heaven knows we need a better team than last year. Flattened in that last match by Slytherin, I couldn't look Severus Snape in the face for weeks. Professor McGonagall peered sternly over her glasses at Harry. I want to hear you're training hard, Potter, or I may change my mind about punishing you. Then she suddenly smiled. Your father will be proud, she said. He was an excellent Quidditch player himself. You're joking. It was dinner time. Harry had just finished telling Ron what had happened when he'd left the grounds with Professor McGonagall. Ron had a piece of steak and kidney pie halfway to his mouth, but he'd forgotten all about it. Seeker, he said, Potter, but first years never. You must be the youngest house player in about a century, said Harry, shoving a pie into his mouth. He felt particularly hungry at the excitement of the afternoon. Wood told me. Ron was so amazed, so impressed. He just sat and gaped at Harry. I start training next week, Harry. Only don't tell anybody. Wood wants to keep it a secret. Fred and George now came into the hall, spotted Harry, and hurried over. Hey, well done, Harry, said George in a low voice. Wood just told us. We're on the team too, beaters. I tell you, we're going to win that Quidditch Cup for sure this year, said Fred. We haven't won anything since Charlie left. But this year's team is going to be brilliant. You must be good, Harry. Wood was almost skipping when he told us. Anyway, we've got to go. Lee Jordan reckons he found a new secret passageway of the school. Bet it's that one behind the statue of Gregory the Smarmy that we found in our first week. See you. Fred and George hardly disappeared when someone far less welcome turned up. Malfoy flanked by Crabbe and Goyle. Having a last year, Potter, when are you getting the train back to the Muggles? You're a lot braver now that you're back on the ground, and you've got your little friends with you, said Harry coolly. There was, of course, nothing at all little about Crabbe and Goyle, but as the high table was full of neither of them could do more than crack their knuckles and scowl. I'd take you on any time of my own, said Malfoy. Tonight, if you want Wizard's Duel, wands only, no contact. What's the matter? Never heard of a Wizard's Duel, I suppose? Of course he has, said Ron, wheeling around. I'm his second. Who's yours? Malfoy looked up at Crabbe and Goyle, was sizing them up. Crab, he said, midnight. All right, we'll meet you in the trophy room. That's always unlocked. When Malfoy had gone, Ron and Harry looked at each other. What is Wizard's Duel? Said Harry. And what do you mean you're my second? Well, a second's there to take over if you die, said Ron casually, getting started at last on his cold pie. Catching the look on Harry's face, he added quickly, but people only die in proper duels. You know, with real wizards, the most you and Malfoy will be able to do in send parks at each other. Neither of you knows enough magic to do any real damage. I bet he expected you to refuse anyway. And what if I wave my wand and nothing happens? Throw it away and punch him on the nose, Ron suggested. Excuse me. They both looked it up. It was Hermione Granger. Can a person eat in a piece in this place? Said Ron. Hermione ignored him and spoke to Harry. I couldn't help overhearing what you and Malfoy were saying. Bet you could, Ron and muttered, and you must go wandering around the school at night. Think of the points. You'll lose Gryffindor points if you are caught, and you're bound to be. It's really selfish of you, and it's really none of your business, said Harry. Goodbye, said Ron. All the same, it wasn't what you call the perfect end to the day, Harry thought as he lay awake, much later listening to Dean and Seamus falling asleep. Neville wasn't back from the hospital wing. Ron had spent all evening giving him advice, such as if he tries to curse you, you'd be better dodge it, because I can't remember how to block them. There was a very good chance they were going to get caught by Filch or Mrs. Norris, and Harry felt he was pushing his luck, breaking another school rule today. On the other hand, Malfoy's sneering face kept looming up out of the darkness. This was his big chance to beat Malfoy face to face. He couldn't miss it. 11:30, Ron muttered at last, "We better go." They pulled out of their bathrobes, picked up their wands, and crept across the tower room, down in the spiral staircase, and into the Gryffindor common room. A few embers were still glowing in the fireplace, turning all the armchairs into hunched black shadows. They had almost reached their portrait hole when a voice spoke from the chair nearest them. I can't believe you're going to do this, Harry. A lamp flickered on. It was Hermione Granger wearing a pink bathrobe and a frown. You, said Ron furiously, go back to bed. I almost told your brother, Hermione snapped Percy. He's a prefect. He put a stop to this. Harry couldn't believe anyone could be so interfering. Come on, he said to Ron. He pushed open the portrait of the fat lady and climbed through the hole. Hermione wasn't going to give up that easily. She followed Ron through the portrait hole, hissing at them like an angry goose. Don't you care about Gryffindor? Do you only care yourselves? I don't want Slytherin to win this house cup, and you'll lose all the points I got from Professor McGonagall knowing about switching spells. Go away. All right, but I warned you. You just remember what I said. When you're on the train home tomorrow, you're so. But what they didn't find out. Hermione had turned to the portrait of the fat lady to get back inside and found herself facing an empty painting. The fat lady had gone on a nighttime visit, and Hermione was locked out of Gryffindor Tower. Now, what am I going to do? She asked Swirly. That's your problem, said Ron. We've got to go. We're going to be late. They hadn't even reached the end of the corridor when Hermione caught up with them. I'm coming with you, she said. You are not. Do you think I'm going to stand out here, wait for Phil to catch me? If he finds out all three of us, I'll tell them the truth that I was trying to stop you and you can back me up. You've got some nerve, said Ron loudly. Shut up, both of you, said Harry sharply. I heard something. It was sort of snuffly. Mrs. Norris, breathed Ron, squinting through the dark. It wasn't Mrs. Norris. It was Neville. He curled up on the floor, fast asleep, but jerked suddenly awake as they crept nearer. Thank goodness you found me. I've been out of here for hours. I couldn't remember the new password to get into bed. Keep your voices down, Neville. The password's pigs now, but it won't help you now. The fat lady's gone off somewhere. How's your arm? Said Harry. Fine, said Neville, showing them Madame Pomfrey mended in about a minute. Good. Well, look, Neville, we've got to go be somewhere. We'll see you later. Don't leave me, said Harry, scrambling to his feet. I don't want to stay here all alone. The Bloody Baron's been past twice already. Ron looked at his watch and then glared furiously at Hermione and Neville. If either of you us get caught, I'll never rest until I've learned that curse of the boogies Quirrell told us about and used it on you. Hermione opened her mouth, perhaps to tell Ron exactly how to curse the boogies, but Harry hissed at her to be quiet and beckoned them all forward. They flitted all along corridors stripped with bars of moonlight from the high windows. At every turn, Harry expected to run into Filch or Mrs. Norris, but they were lucky. They sped up a staircase to the third floor and tiptoed toward the trophy room. And Malfoy, Crabbe weren't there yet. The crystal trophy cases glimmered where the moonlight caught up them. Cups, shielded plates, and statues winked silver and glowed in the darkness. They edged along the walls, keeping their eyes on the doors. At either end of the room, Harry took out his wand in case Malfoy leapt in and started. At once, the minutes crept by. He's late. Maybe he's checking out, Ron whispered. Then a noise in the next room made them jump. Harry had only just raised his wand when they heard someone speak, and it wasn't Malfoy. Sniff around my sweet. The night we've been looking in the corner. It was Filch speaking to Mrs. Norris. Horror struck. Harry waved madly at the other three to follow him as quickly as possible. They scurried silently toward the door, away from Filch's voice. Neville's robes had barely whipped out round the corner when they heard Filch enter the trophy room. They're in here somewhere, they heard him mutter, probably hiding. This way, Harry mouthed to the others, and petrified they began to creep down a long gallery full of suits of armor. They could hear Filch getting nearer. Neville suddenly let out a frightened squeak and broke into a run. He tripped, grabbed Ron around the waist, and the pair of toppled right into a suit of armor. The clanging and crashing were enough to wake the whole castle. Run, Harry yelled, and the four of them sprinted down the gallery, not looking back to see whether Filch was following. They swung around the doorpost and galloped down one corridor then another, Harry in the lead. Without any idea where they were or where they were going, they ripped through a tapestry and found themselves in a hidden passageway, hurtled along it and out near in the Charms classroom. which they knew was miles from the trophy room. I think we lost him, Harry panted, leaning being against the cold and wall and whipping his forehead. Neville was bent double and spluttering. I told you, Hermione gasped, clutching at the stitch in her chest. I told you, we've got to get back to Gryffindor Tower, said Ron quickly as possible. Malfoy tricked you, Hermione said to Harry. You realize that, don't you? He was never going to meet you. Filch knew someone was going to be in the trophy room. Malfoy must have tipped him off. Harry thought he was probably right, but he wasn't going to tell her that. Let's go. It wasn't going to be that simple. They hadn't gone more than a dozen paces when a doorknob rattled and something came shooting out of a classroom in front of them. It was Peeves. He caught sight of them and gave a squeal of delight. Shut up, Peeves, please. You'll get us thrown out. Peeves cackled, wandering around at midnight. Ickle fistries. Tut, tut, tut. Naughty, naughty, you'll get caughty. Not if you give us away, Peeves, please. Should tell Fidge. I should send Peeves in a saintly voice, but glittered. It's for your own good, you know. But get out of the way, snapped Ron, taking a swipe at Peeves. This was such a big mistake. Students out of bed, Peeves bellowed. Students out of bed. Down the chimes corridor. Ducking under Peeves, they ran for their lives right to the end of the corridor where they slammed into a door and it was locked. That's it, Ron moaned as they pushed helplessly as the door. We're done for. This is the end. They could hear footsteps. Filch was running as fast as he could toward Peeves' shout. Oh, move over, Hermione snarled. She grabbed Harry's wand, tapped the lock, and whispered, Alohomora. The lock clicked and the swung open again. They piled through it, shut it quickly, and pressed their ears against it. Listening, which way did they go? Peeves, Filch was saying. Quick, tell me. Say please. Don't mess with the please now. Where did they go? Shame to say nothing. If you don't say please, said Peeves in his annoying sing-song voice. All right, please. Nothing. Ha ha. Told you I wouldn't say nothing if you didn't say please. Ha ha ha. And they heard the sound of Peeves whooshing away and Filch cursing in rage. He thinks this door is locked, Harry whispered. I think we'll be okay. Get off, Neville, for Neville had been tugging on the sleeve of Harry's bathrobe for the last minute. What? Harry turned around and saw quite clearly what from a moment he was sure he walked into a nightmare. This was too much on top of everything that had happened so far. They weren't in a room as he supposed they were, in a corridor, the forbidden corridor on the third floor. And now they knew why it was forbidden. They were looking straight into the eyes of a monstrous dog, a dog that filled the whole space between ceiling and floor. It had 3 heads, 3 pairs of rolling mad eyes, 3 noises twitching and quivering in the direction 3 drooling mouths, saliva hanging in slippery ropes from yellowish fangs. It was standing quite still, all 6 eyes staring at them, and Harry knew that the only reason they weren't already dead was that their sudden appearance had taken it by surprise. But it was quickly getting over that. There was no mistaking what those thunderous growls meant. Harry grabbed from the doorknob between Filch and Death. He'd take Filch. They fell backward. Harry slammed the door shut, and they ran. They almost felt Lou, but down the corridor, Filch must have hurried off to look for them somewhere else. because they didn't see him anywhere, but they hardly cared. All they wanted to do was put as much space as possible between them and that monster. They didn't stop running until they reached the portrait of the fat lady on the seventh floor. Where on earth you all have been, she asked, looking at their bathrobes hanging on their shoulders and their flushed, sweaty faces. Never mind that, pig snout, panted Harry, and the portrait swung forward. They scrambled into the common room and collapsed, trembling into armchairs. It was a while before any of them said anything. Neville, indeed, it looked as if he never speaking again. What do they think they're doing, keeping a thing like that locked up in a school? Said Ron finally. If any dog needs exercise, that no one does. Hermione got her breath and her bad temper back again. You don't use any of your you don't use your eyes. Any of you do, she snapped. Didn't you see what was standing on? The floor, Harry suggested. I wasn't looking at his feet. I was too busy with its heads. No, not the floor. It was standing on a trapdoor, which means it wasn't there by accident. It's obviously guarding something. She stood up, glaring at him. I hope you're pleased with yourselves. We could all have been killed or worse ourselves. Now, if you two don't mind, I'm going to bed before either of you with a clever to one of us get us killed or worse, expelled. Ron stared after her, his mouth open. No, we don't mind, he said. You think we dragged her along with you, wouldn't you? But Hermione had given Harry something else to think about. As he climbed back into bed, the dog was guarding something. What Hagrid said. Gringotts was the safest place in the world for something you wanted to hide, except perhaps Hogwarts. It looked as though Harry had found out where the grubby little package from Vault 713 was.